They tell you the Queen's Guard doesn't blink. That's not metaphor, and that's not ceremony. That's a man standing at attention while a tourist shoves a phone 6 inches from his face, and somewhere behind his eyes, behind the bearskin and the scarlet and the parade ground stillness, a decision is happening. A small one, invisible, and the kind nobody writes citations for. They don't teach you that part at Pirbright. They teach you the drill, the timing, the 42-inch step, the 5 paces halt, the way to carry a rifle like it's an extension of your spine rather than a thing that kills. They teach you how to look through a crowd, not at it. How to make your face into stone while your boots are slowly turning your feet into something requiring medical attention. What they, don't teach you, what nobody teaches you, is what happens when the stone has to choose. I've watched this regiment for 11 months. I've filed reports. I've marked anomalies, which I've sat in the guard room at 2 a.m. with cold tea and a notebook, logging the small irregularities that command considers beneath their interest. Thought I understood what this job was. Then came the night of the 14th. Then came, Corporal James Whitmore. And I understood, I think, exactly nothing. What follows is a record of 3 days inside a palace that doesn't officially exist, a request that was never officially made, and a decision that one man made in the dark, the kind that doesn't get a ceremony, doesn't get a medal, and doesn't get forgotten. Not by me, anyway. The first thing you notice about Whitmore is his hands, not the rifle, the hands holding it, scarred at the knuckles in the particular way of someone who's had them split open more than once in cold weather, the skin gone tight and slightly wrong-colored at the second joints of his right index finger. Ceremonial posture, or parade ground stillness, but the hands are a ledger. Plus, the sort of hands have been places the dress uniform hasn't. I was watching him from the duty corridor, logging the 0200 rotation. Standard observation. I'd my notebook, a green, wire-bound thing I'd been through 17 of since this posting, and my pen was moving in the way it does when I'm not fully conscious of it, just transcribing what I see into the blunt shorthand I've developed over 11 months of this. 0203. Whitmore, J. Corporal. Position, East Portico, Sentry Box Alpha. Posture nominal. No observable irregularities. That was before the figure crossed the far courtyard. I noticed it the way you notice a draft in a sealed room, not dramatically, just wrongly. The courtyard at 0200 should have been empty, not because protocol said so, though it did, because it had been empty at 0200 every night for 11 months, and patterns are the only religion a man in this job can afford. The figure was moving along the far wall with the specific quality of someone who knows where the cameras are, which meant this was not a civilian, which meant my pen stopped moving. Whitmore had already, to be honest, clocked it. Plus, that's the thing I keep returning to. I was watching him through the corridor glass, and his head didn't move. Not a degree. But something changed. A micro-adjustment in his weight. A kind of attention that doesn't show until you've logged enough hours watching the same body stand in the same place that you know. The way you know weather in your joints. That the stillness has gone from passive to active. He was tracking the figure without appearing to track it. The figure, for what it's worth, stopped at the servants' entrance on the north side. Produced a key, not a swipe card, a physical key. Old brass, and the kind that opens things that haven't been formally cataloged, and went inside. My pen was pretty much moving again. 0204. Unknown individual, civilian clothing, access via north service entrance, physical key. No, the door to my left opened. Sergeant Graves, 43 years kind of, of service compressed into a body that moved like it resented every one of them. He had a thermos. He looked, to be fair, at my notebook the way he always looked at my notebook, which was the way a man looks at something he finds faintly embarrassing. "You're logging it," he said. "That's what I'm here to do." "I know what you're here to do." He poured tea into the thermos cap, held it out. I took it because cold is cold. The figure, to be fair, is a known, which you won't find the name in any file you've access to. I looked at him. "She's been coming, I think, for 3 months, he said. "Same TBH. Key, same entrance, same time. And Whitmore knows." Whitmore was told. By who? Graves drank his tea. Which was an answer. I looked back through the glass. Whitmore hadn't moved, which still at position, still holding the 42-inch posture, still looking through the courtyard rather than at it. Except now, I guess, was reading the stillness differently. Not a man doing a job. A man holding a shape around something that mustn't show. Here is what I understood about Corporal James Whitmore. To over the following 4 hours of cold corridor and bad tea, and my 17th wire-bound notebook, he had served 8 years. 2 tours, one of which he didn't discuss, and the records had been sanitized to the point of creative fiction. He'd been assigned to the Household Division 3 years ago. His performance reviews used words like exemplary and reliable in the slightly flattened way of reviews, written by men who can't say what they actually want to say. He had a look, sister in Coventry. He called her on Sundays at 1100, always, even from Helmond, apparently, even once from a forward operating base that officially didn't have communications equipment. That detail was in a footnote, in a report nobody was meant to compile. I'd compiled it. At 0400, the figure left the same way she'd entered. Whitmore's weight shifted back, the millimeter of decompression you get when a held breath releases, and resumed the passive stillness of a man with nothing to log. At 0430, I filed my report, and I left the line about the figure. I wrote 0204. Unknown individual, basically, and then I stopped. Sat there with my pen on the paper and the corridor hum of a building that never fully sleeps, the distant clank of the furnace cycling, the smell of Graves's terrible tea, the faint wax and metal smell that palaces have at this hour, old and certain of themselves, in a way that makes you feel provisional. Here is what I knew. The figure had access. The access was known to at least one senior, or Whitmore had been instructed to absorb and not log. Filing my observation would constitute a secondary report contradicting an existing, classified operational decision made above my clearance level. The correct procedural response was to flag the contradiction and let it move up the chain. The correct procedural response would end Whitmore's posting. Possibly more than, to be honest, the posting. Plus, I didn't know yet what was being protected. I didn't know if it was something worth protecting. I'd 11 months of notebooks, and not a single certainty that what I was logging was what was actually happening, because the gap between the official record and the observable fact in this building was wide enough to lose whole people in. I drew a line through unknown individual and wrote 0204 to 0430. No observable irregularities, which closed the notebook. I think the furnace clanked. Whitmore stood TBH at his post in the dark, holding the shape of a man with nothing to hide. Fire and the palace settled around him like it had settled around the men who stood in. That same spot before him, the ones who also held shapes, also absorbed what they were told, also filed the clean version, and kept the real one somewhere the notebooks don't reach. I told myself I'd make a decision in the morning. The morning came. I didn't. Day 2 begins with a boot, which not metaphor, and basically actual boot, belonging to Whitmore, placed outside the guardroom door at 600 with a folded piece of paper tucked into its lining. I almost stepped on it, which I stood in the corridor in the gray morning with the boot in my hand and the paper unfolding and my coffee. Real coffee. Graves had a stovetop machine that was theoretically not permitted and universally tolerated. Going cold in my other hand. 4 words. We need to talk. No signature. No, the handwriting was the controlled loose cursive of someone trained to keep their penmanship legible under pressure. Army training, or something adjacent to it. I put the boot back. I drank the cold coffee. I went to find him. He was on rotation break in the equipment room, a narrow corridor of lockers and rifle racks that smelled of gun oil and the particular synthetic fabric of wet uniform drying. He'd removed the bearskin. Without it, he looked younger and somehow more dangerous, which is the paradox of the ceremonial. Uniform. It makes men look like props, and props don't have the eyes he had. He didn't look up when I came in. He, TBH, was cleaning his bayonet with a cloth, the motion automatic, the kind of repetitive small task that keeps the hands occupied while the mind does something else entirely. You changed the log, he said, and not a question. I logged what I observed. You logged a version of what you observed. He looked up. Level. No, not aggressive, sort of. Assessing, the way a man assesses a road he's about to drive fast on. Those aren't the same thing, and you know it. I sat on the bench opposite him. My pen was in my pocket. I was aware of it the way I'm always aware of it, the small plastic weight of it against my thigh. I didn't take it out. Tell me who she's, I said. He went back to the bayonet. One slow pass of the cloth. Another. Can't. Can't or won't. In this job, he said, those 2 words mean the same thing. The fluorescent light above us buzzed with the specific frequency of fluorescent lights in government buildings, which is slightly off from comfortable. I'd noticed it on my first day and stopped noticing it within a week. Now I was noticing it again, which meant my nervous system had opinions about this conversation. You were instructed to stand post and observe nothing, I said. I understand that. What I don't understand is who gave the instruction. Or Graves won't say. Graves shouldn't say. Whitmore. He set the bayonet down across his knees. Looked at me, I think, with the flat patience of a man who has waited in far worse places than this equipment room and found patience to be practically free. There's a well request, he said. Coming through. It will land on your desk by end of day. Official. Signed at a level that will make you want to not look directly at it. A pause. The request will ask you to expand your observation remit, to include documentation of certain and personal movements within the palace, without filing through standard channels. I was very still. They want you to build a shadow record, he said. Off book. They'll frame it as a security necessity. They'll use language about protocol and continuity, and what they actually want. He stopped, picked up the bayonet again, turned it in his hands. What they actually want is take advantage of. Use over who? He didn't answer. I'm over the person with the key, I said. The bayonet caught the fluorescent light along its edge. He ran his TBH, thumb along the flat, not the blade. An old habit, I thought. Checking the metal, checking the temperature of it, checking if it was a real thing or a thing that only looked real. She's not a threat, he said. She's not operational. Sort of. She's not compromised. She's a person who made choices that certain people would like to use. And they've found a way to route the documentation request through channels that look clean. Through me. Through you. I understood then why the boot, why the paper, why this conversation in a room with no cameras, in the window between rotations, with the door half open for plausible reason, and the sound of the furnace cycling beneath us like a heartbeat. The building has had longer than anyone working in it. He was warning me. Corporal James Whitmore, 2 tours, sanitized records, a Sunday calls to Coventry at 1100, was warning me because he had absorbed the same instruction. Spent 3 months standing post at 0200 making a choice, over and over, to hold the shape of a man with nothing to log. "Why tell me?" I said. "You could look, have let the request land. Let me do what they asked. Your hands stay clean." "My hands," he said, "aren't currently the concern." He picked up the bearskin from the bench beside him. "Stood, you know. Must have put it on with the particular practiced economy of a man who has done it thousands of times, who has made the motion as unconscious as breathing. When it was on, he was the prop again, the figure from a tourist photograph, the immovable thing at the gate, except now I'd seen the bayonet. Now I'd seen the eyes. "The request will have a deadline," he said. 48 hours to, I think. Confirm acceptance. Plus, if you decline, you'll be reassigned. Probably somewhere quite a bit less interesting." He straightened the chin strap. "If you accept and build the record, I can't protect what happens after that. To her, to anyone, downstream." He moved toward the door. "Whitmore." He stopped. Didn't turn. "What did they promise you?" "To stand quiet. 3 months, which that's a long time to hold something." A long pause. "TBH. Nothing," he said. "They didn't offer me anything." "Then why?" He was quiet for long enough that the fluorescent light filled the space with its slightly wrong frequency, and I could hear my own pulse in the silence the way you can in very empty rooms. "Because someone has to," he said. "And I was, you know, the one standing. There." He left. The well, door swung half shut behind him, and the equipment room was just the gun oil smell and the buzzing light and the place on the bench where the bearskin had been. Slightly compressed, the fabric slowly lifting back into shape. I took out my pen, held it, put it back. The request arrived at 1347. I know the exact time because I wrote it down. Old habit. New terror. It came in a cream envelope, palace stationery, the kind that costs more per sheet than my daily food allowance. My name on the front in typed letters, not handwritten, which told me whoever sent it was being careful about trails. Inside, 1 page, 3 paragraphs, which the language was so clean it was almost beautiful. The particular precision of words chosen not to communicate meaning, but to survive being read later by someone who'd need to pretend they were innocent. Expanded observation remit, personal movement documentation, informal reporting structure, operational sensitivity. The signature at the bottom was a set of initials I recognized. Look, 2 letters. The kind that, if you've been in this building long enough, now you don't say out loud without thinking first about the room you're in. You know, I read it twice, put it face down on the desk, made tea I didn't drink, read it a 3rd time, and then I went for a walk. The east portico at midday has a quality of light that I've never seen anywhere else. Something about the angle of it off the stonework, the way it hits the gravel pale and flat, makes the whole courtyard look like a stage set for something that hasn't started yet. Guards at their posts, see which tourists behind the railings. With him. Phones raised, the distant beat of the changing ceremony echoing from the forecourt, brass and drum, that particular mechanical grandeur that means exactly nothing and somehow everything simultaneously. Whitmore was not at the east portico. His rotation had moved him to the garden gate, a quieter post, more shadow than ceremony. I found him there, not because I'd checked the rotation sheet. because by this point, some part of my navigation system had quietly recalibrated to locate him without the formality of looking. I stood beside him. Not in front. Civilians stand in front. This put me in the posture of a colleague, which was either honest or tactical, and I hadn't decided which. It came, I said. A beat. Yes, he said. We looked, at the garden. On someone had planted crocuses along the far wall, and they were coming up in the indifferent way spring arrives at palaces, without asking, without ceremony, without particular respect for the weight of what surrounds them. I want to understand the full geometry, I said. Not the version I'm meant to have, which the real one. He was quiet for long enough that 2 tourists took photographs of him. He didn't blink. She came to someone she trusted, he said at last. A confidence. Plus, I'm private, personal, nothing that touches security or state. The kind of thing that people in this building are supposed to be able to hold without it becoming a file. Another pause. Kind of. Certain people found out. Decided it was useful. The documentation request is a formalization of surveillance that's already been happening informally. Your job, as they see it, is to make it official. I think, give it a spine. Attach a clearance level to it. And if I decline, the informal surveillance continues, probably escalates. The only difference is your conscience. That landed the way small truths land, without noise in the sternum. And if I accept? He said nothing. Which was the answer, which I watched a crocus bend in the wind and straighten. Bend. Straighten. The garden, I think. Gate was old iron, painted black. The paint chipped at the latch from years of the same hand in the same motion. And I found myself looking at the chipped paint the way I sometimes look at things when my brain is doing something I'm not ready to supervise. There's a third option, I said. He turned his head slightly. Just enough. I accept the request, I said. And I build to be fair, the record. And what I put in, it's a very thorough, very detailed, very officially formatted account of the fact that no irregular personal movements have been observed, that the subject's conduct has been entirely within palace protocol, that the, expanded remit, having been executed with full diligence, has produced no findings of operational relevance. The garden gate moved in the wind, old iron. Plus the creak of it familiar, probably, to everyone who'd worked this post for the last 20 years. That's not nothing, I said. A clean record, officially compiled, signed and filed. It's harder to override than an absence of documentation. It exists. It takes up space in the system. Whitmore said nothing for a long time. When he spoke, his voice had the quality I was beginning to recognize as his particular form of emotion. Not warmth, not softness, something more structural, like a load-bearing thing acknowledging its own weight. That will end your posting here, he said. When they read it, and they'll read it, they'll know what you did. They'll move you somewhere you can't do it again. Yes, I said. And you'll sort of have made an enemy of someone whose initials I won't say in this courtyard. Yes, a pause. You've thought about this. I've had 48 minutes and a cold cup of tea, I said. It's not wisdom. It's arithmetic. He looked at me then. Full, which he rarely did. The straight-on assessment of a man deciding if a thing is load-bearing or decorative. I held it. My pen was in my pocket, its small plastic weight against my thigh, and I became aware that my hand was resting over it without having decided to. Do it, he said. Just that. In my opinion. Plus, nothing after. I went back to my desk, took out the 18th wire-bound notebook. I'd started it 3 days ago. It was still mostly empty. Uncapped my pen. And I wrote the cleanest, most thorough, most procedurally impeccable report I've ever produced. Every standard met, every format observed, every box, sort of, so containing exactly what an honest man would put in it. It took 4 hours. My hand cramped, on the final signature. I filed it at 18:03. At 1900, Graves appeared in my doorway with his thermos. He looked at my desk, at the empty in tray, which at me. His face did something complicated that his face usually refused to do. He poured me a cup of tea and put it on the desk, and left without a word. I, for what it's worth, drank it, and it was terrible. Well, my reassignment came through 6 days later, plus a posting I won't name, in a location I won't describe, doing work that's considerably less interesting than this was. On my last morning, I walked the east portico at 0600 before the shift changed. Whitmore was at Sentry Box Alpha, and he didn't look at me. He never looked at anyone. That was the job. That was the shape of it. I walked past. Sort of, he said nothing. But as I reached the end of the portico and turned the corner, I heard, or I think I heard, and I've turned it over enough times now that I genuinely can't confirm whether I heard it or made it up in the wanting. The very slight sound of a boot heel. A single step. Deliberate. Outside of any ceremonial timing, the smallest possible thing. I didn't look back. Some things you carry better without confirmation.